Hi everyone, my name is Mark Lengsfeld. Some of you may have seen me last year. I presented as well. During the past year, I wanted to share with you a little bit of how our business has evolved and what makes our makerspace what it is and how it's rapidly changed. But first I wanted to go through and show you how the maker movement is already impacting the world. So here's a chart of what we're looking at across the world right now. You can see you got a lot of makerspaces already populating around the world. But when you zoom in, it actually looks more like this. I'm looking forward to a few years from now, it might be 10, it might be 2, where it's basically as dense as this, as what you see just on that screen. And the reason I'm looking forward to that is, I mean, just look around. How many people do you think came out today? Any estimates? Probably 3,000, something like that. And from the various sources, that's already double what we've seen from last year. So we're looking forward to just this ever-expanding movement, and it's really ever-expanding of bringing technology and how we're using technology into our homes to make the things that we need. So I wanted to share with you a little further some of the things that we've been seeing. So makerspaces, the ones last year when I opened up, there were actually 3 of us that opened up in Orange County, and we each have our own fortes. One is more towards molding, another is towards automotive, and myself, we even get into fabrics. And all these different things is kind of what is similar to when we go out and try different foods. I mean, there's a McDonald's next to the Thai restaurant. It's not that I have anything against the McDonald's or the Thai restaurant on one day versus another. I just wanted something a little different. These are the same flavors that we're seeing here in the maker movement. I mean, like you walk from the front end of this building right now, you see 3D printers all over the place. Walk towards the back end, it's drones, giving you a little bit of a trim on the hair. So there's all these different flavors. I see it daily in my shop, where it might be a kid coming through and just wanting to learn a little extra, or somebody looking to prototype a tool or a part for their own invention. Just earlier at my booth, that's exactly what happened. I met a fella, he wanted to prototype something out, and he was asking some questions about it. So there's all different types, and you see them evolving, some next to each other. One of the more visible hubs of it is actually over in Boston, and you see art type spaces where a lot of artists are co-located and they're really sharing resources just like a makerspace. You've even seen some pop up that are turning into biospaces, so that way they can do research that way. And one way to think of it, machine shops, you know, sometimes they'll let you rent space as well, or like a barber shop. You've got 2 barbers next to each other in that shop, and they're renting the chairs next to each other. That's a lot of what's happening and what we're seeing in the makerspace. So the most important part of all of this is how it's connecting with the community. In the community, like I said, there's the bio version. Well, there's specifically a bio community. You know, in Boston, it's a really strong bio community. In Modesto, okay, probably not. So each community has a reflection of what their needs are. If you walk up and down here, you'll see different makerspaces and what they're offering. There are some which are more into cosplay. There's some which are more into really just 3D printing. There are some that are heavily child-oriented, and some that are really even toddler-oriented. So we're seeing this evolution of like, how do we fit the need of those makers, that, especially the ones that are in development. So some of the activities that have been happening in my shop, this past winter, we had a class where we had 30-some kids go through and build a whole bunch of 3D printers, and they just had a blast. Now, granted, the printers themselves weren't the most robust. I mean, the printers themselves were a couple $100 kit version, and in my shop, I've got a multi-$1,000 machine sitting right next to it. But what they learned is how to put things together. You got to remember, some of these kids are missing even how to use something simple like a screwdriver. And so it's great to see them go through and engage and try to actually put things together from start to finish. Some of the other projects that we've been seeing, some of the kids have been building up skateboards. We actually have a gentleman in our booth who just recently started or got fully funded a Kickstarter campaign, and where he's making skateboards, and he sold, I'm not sure how many thousands worth or $1,000 worth, but he's making a business out of it. And a lot of that came from his passion as a child, skateboarding, and then later designing and working with tools. You see up here a couple other examples. You got the Pachinko machine. It's simple, but just going through and drilling holes and laying things out. The cards that you're seeing, it's using CAD software and then 3D printing, and then I'm not sure how well everyone is aware, but most 3D prints, they're not quite right. There's a little bit of post-processing that's still involved. I kind of liken it to sand castings, where you have a little bit of machining that's required. So you drill out the hole a little extra just to make sure everything fits. Right below that, you've got vacuum forming. And in the vacuum forming, they were using Legos to go through and make chocolate bars. I gotta say I like that one. Chocolate bars, sweet tooth. Oh yeah, it's a good thing. And then on the right, we got bobbleheads. And you know, that was when we scanned in his head, printed it out, but we also had him go through and build up his own body. And it's the experimentation and actually working with their hands. It works on their hand-eye coordination, but they're also ultimately accomplishing something. Just along the way, realize this is also a reflection of the community I live in. This community is very heavy into the education side, and so we've picked up and brought a lot of programs towards that. One of the things that happened in the past year, we went through and built or made a prosthetic hand for a little girl. As it happened, the story picked up, and it was actually picked up by NBC Nightly News, Entrepreneur.com. We even found it in the South China News in a newspaper article. The only way we could tell was build at Workspace, and then everything was in Chinese. But it's just awesome to see how 3D printing and being able to help people is really touching a nerve worldwide. In that article, I even got a call from somebody out in the outback in Australia, in Romania, and also in Argentina. It is those types of enabling the future was where the original designs came from. Those designs are made by makers all around the world, evolved. The design that she had right there used some nuts and bolts, while the current designs don't even use that anymore. It's strictly 3D printed parts, and it's just a matter of sizing it to the right dimension. Over on the other side, wow, that's loud. On the other side, we have a gentleman here. He ended up on the TV show Who Wants to Be a Millionaire Inventor? And what he was getting into was creating mouth guards that have chips inside. And so when somebody gets hit, particularly a child, they can actually record the G's that they got hit by. And one of the interesting facts about that is usually a concussion doesn't show up until 20 minutes after the event has happened. And so this is, in essence, a warning towards the coach to say, hey, something is wrong. He needs to take a break and sit out. On a side note, he got successfully funded on that TV show as well. So it's really interesting to see how all these types of makers are influencing the world. Back to a bit more about the community I live in. STEM is a hot topic, and we all hear different versions of it. STEM, science, technology, engineering, math. Sometimes it's called STEAM, art being in there. I've even heard STREAM, which is robotics, being applied into it. In all cases, what it's doing is getting the kids to work with, it could be the robotics, but to work in that spatial environment. It could be from coding on one end over towards, actually that is exactly what they were doing on this one, and over here on electronics, and getting comfortable with circuits and just parts and pieces that they're going to see in the future. The best that we can hope for is not that they're just using it at work at the office, but they're actually using it to fix things and do things at home. Further to that, here's another piece with the robotics. So if you happen to come across my booth, I recognize a few faces here. You'll notice the Ozobots, and those have been such a wonderful tool in helping to teach not just robotics, but really coding. Basically order of operation, and just giving them a structured flow of how to complete a project. On other times, we have a little bit more fun. There you see the girls. It was a Girl Scout troop that came by, and we were lasering pumpkins. And they also brought some pumpkins to carve as well. And then further on, we were doing some more of the car races. But in all of these cases, we're using technology and trying to understand how they can benefit from it and making them comfortable. Because one of the things, if you ever come to my shop, you'll see equipment. It's not particularly large, but it's effective. I don't have a laser that's, a 4-foot bed by 8 feet that you might see in a manufacturing facility. A small one, but it doesn't intimidate, and that's the goal that we have. So some other aspects of the community. Not sure what happened there. Some other aspects of community living, and like I said, comes back to the community. Some other aspects is working with the SoCal Drone Zone, and having earlier this year we had the International Drone Day. Happens to be Pi Day as well for you math geeks. And so we went through and celebrated with them, and there were some 800 people, and it's because there's such a nerve that strikes, particularly with makers, as we see here in the back with the drone races as well. So I wanted to kind of reiterate, in terms of any kind of makerspace, especially if any of you are thinking about creating one, understand what your community is and make sure you're participating in it. For those of you who aren't looking to create one, but are looking to find one, understand that there's different flavors. And it's fine if you want to join one and not another. It's perfectly acceptable. It's just they all help in their own particular ways. So I wanted to open up the floor to take some questions, see if anybody had any thoughts.
Who has a question?
Is there a
is there like a listing of local maker locations?
So the picture that I showed you at the beginning showed it's a listing for all the makerspaces that have listed themselves. It's makerspaces.org is the website, and there are other ones. If you go to Make Magazine, there's ways to find listings of makerspaces as well. Not everybody lists themselves on every single one, but that's a good way to start looking. Because as a term, makerspace is not widely accepted yet. Everybody here fully understands it. That's why we're here. But like when I set up my shop, a lot of the locals were like, "What are you?" So I had to kind of think creatively. Engineering studio, design studio. Studio seems to be a word that sticks. And you kind of massage it to see how the community reacts to it. But in terms of looking up for listings online, Makerspaces does work as a term.
Do I have another question?
What kind of services do you offer at your makerspace?
So, in my particular makerspace, some of the services are engineering design services. From a makerspace standpoint, memberships where people sign up, and we'll teach you usually one piece of equipment. It could be the vacuum former, the laser. It could be more like the Cricut, so a vinyl cutter or craft industry based one. It depends what you're looking for. I've had fellas, all they wanted to do was work with the scanner. I know, trippy, huh?
So, what kind of test equipment do you have? Let's say I have
Sorry.
What kind of test equipment do you have? Let's say if I want to design a board and I bring it there, is there any way I can troubleshoot it using an oscilloscope or, throw in a function generator to design the wave or anything?
So, for a electronic side of it, if I heard that right? Okay. Pretty much just the typical multimeters more than anything. If you wanted to test yourself. Beyond that, then we would start looking, maybe a hackerspace might be more appropriate for you. Or the next step is going to more of a professional service that does exactly that full time. There's labs around, and for those of you who have ever touched upon, say like the aerospace industry, there's testing facilities all around Southern California. They test for various different things. They'll test for shaking, they'll test for braking, they'll test for heat, they'll test for how good the solder is, whatever the case may be.
Okay. Any more questions?
What kind of things do you make for other people?
So there's some stuff I'm allowed to talk about, and some I'm not. The reason I say not is because from an engineering design service, a lot of work that I do is actually non-disclosure agreement type of work. But I can tell you generally, like I work with some items that are toys, but pretty robust type of toys. So mostly mechanical. Others, I've worked with, my background happens to be mechanical engineering, and I came out of the oil and gas sector. So I work with companies that do oil and gas work and oil and gas equipment. And that's in part because I understand the terminology and the codes that they work with.
What age group do you usually work with?
So it depends on which side of the program. So we have a kids-oriented program, and where we're actually going out to the schools quite often, or they're coming to our workspaces. We've taught as low or as young is more appropriate, as young as 5, so in transitional kindergarten, and I think the oldest is, 60, 70, somewhere in that ballpark.
Another question?
I'm still looking for that 99-year-old.
So we can bring our own, I guess, hardware and stuff and go to the facility and work on it there, or
So most makerspaces, and this goes across the board, most makerspaces are set up so that way you're really looking to make use of the equipment, but we have no clue what materials you want to work with. We'll tend to keep a supply of materials on hand, but you know, like with the lasers, for example, some basic wood, plywood or whatever, and some acrylic. But if you start working in mahogany, I'm sorry, I don't carry mahogany, or some specialized veneer, then yes, we don't carry that. We do expect you to bring that along. So that goes, you know, some of it is also we just happen to be working in certain materials on our regular basis, and we'll have that. Other things we just haven't gotten into.
Okay, and then also, do we have to schedule a time? Do we have to reserve space, I guess?
So to learn about, say, like a laser or CNC or something like that, it's best to schedule a time, learn how the equipment is used, and then also to schedule a time to make sure you have use of that machine. Now, I tend to keep my load fairly light, and so most of the time people can do it just ad hoc. And I've had a few times in working with some of the local colleges where they've come in and begged and pleaded to come in at midnight because their project is due the next morning. I've come in.
So what do you see for the future of Makerspace when it comes to intellectual property?
It's a bit of a conundrum, obviously. So there's so much that's open source out there. I mean, you see in a lot of aspects, it's whoever can get it to market first ends up being the winner, and to prove that there is market space for it. I mean, if you're gonna come out with something and then some giant comes in and squashes you, that's one thing. But if you're proving there's a market, you've developed a brand name. In a lot of ways, developing a brand name is more important than the intellectual property itself if it's open. Now, that's speaking from I'll say a personal aspect, not from a legal lawyer speak. I don't make those $300 an hour that they do. But I would say that really getting to market first and proving that it's capable and proving to the world that you're a reliable company is what's really key.
Any more questions? Do I have another?
Well, thank you for your time today.